1. The Vanishing Phone. Last evening, my friend Mia practically dragged me out of my sleek downtown loft in Austin, Texas to catch an opening act at a buzzing local venue known for its mix of blues, indie rock, and experimental sounds. The night was a whirlwind of pulsating music, clinking glasses, and animated conversations under the glow of vintage neon signs. We settled at a crowded table near the stage, where the ambient light flickered with every beat, and I quickly became absorbed in the lively atmosphere. After a few rounds of drinks and bouts of laughter that blurred time, I suddenly realized that my cell phone was missing. Panic set in as I retraced my steps in a state of mounting desperation. I carefully scanned every surface of the table, checked the narrow, cramped restrooms where echoes of distant music mingled with the hum of voices, and even looked behind the bar's cluttered counter, where memories of the night were scattered like confetti. Nothing turned up. In a moment of exasperation, I borrowed Mia's phone to call my own. After 2 rings that echoed into the void, a low, raspy chuckle, a voice both hauntingly familiar and disturbingly distorted by static, answered briefly before the call abruptly disconnected. I tried several more times, but the mysterious voice never returned, leaving me with more questions than answers. Resigned and unnerved, I left the venue under the heavy, humid Texan night, each step feeling like a retreat from an unresolved mystery. The following morning, still groggy and questioning the events of the previous night, I discovered my phone lying undisturbed on my nightstand, exactly where I had left it. The inexplicable incident lingered like a half-remembered dream, casting a shadow of doubt over whether it had been a trick of my inebriated mind or a subtle intrusion from an unknown presence. 2. The Late Bus Ride. Growing up in a sleepy suburb just outside Philadelphia, I earned a reputation for always being the last one to be picked up by the school bus. One brisk autumn morning, when the air was crisp and the fallen leaves painted the streets in vibrant shades of red and gold, I found myself waiting alone at the familiar corner stop. The silence was punctuated only by the distant rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of early birds. Suddenly, an unusual bus, pristine, almost eerie in its emptiness, rolled to a stop with a quiet hiss of brakes. The driver, a kindly older man known as Mr. Jenkins, greeted me with a warm yet unnerving smile. "Hop in, we'll go back for the others," he said in a voice that mixed genuine cheer with a subtle insistence that set my nerves on edge. With a hesitant step, I boarded the bus, feeling an odd dissonance between his friendly demeanor and the unsettling emptiness of the vehicle. As we began to move, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was off. "Where are the other kids?" I asked, my voice barely audible against the hum of the engine. Mr. Jenkins offered a vague, almost dismissive smile and continued to speak in a tone that grew increasingly persuasive. The air in the bus felt heavy, as though it were charged with an unspoken warning. In that moment of clarity, I mustered every ounce of courage to decline his insistence, and within minutes, the familiar, brightly colored school bus roared up to the curb. I hurried aboard, feeling a mix of relief and lingering dread. Later, as my parents listened intently to my account over dinner, their worried expressions and hushed voices confirmed that my unsettling encounter was something they, too, had sensed deep down. The memory of that eerie ride remains etched in my mind as a stark reminder of how appearances can be deceiving. 3. The Eccentric Neighbor. A few years ago in Seattle, I moved into a newly renovated apartment that I had rented from a close friend who had recently acquired the property. The building's modern design and carefully curated interiors promised a fresh start, yet my excitement was soon overshadowed by a series of bizarre events emanating from the neighboring unit. The resident, known to me only as Veronica, was an enigma. Although she was in her early 40s, her worn features and a gaze that seemed to hold the weight of decades lent her an air of unsettling antiquity. Night after night, as rain dripped softly against the window panes and the city lights blurred into watery reflections, her apartment became a theater of the strange. Old gospel records blared at full volume, their sound reverberating through the thin walls, while her impassioned monologues, directed at an unseen audience, filled the night air with a mix of fervor and melancholy. The disturbances grew to the point where sleep became a distant memory. One particularly stormy night, driven by a mix of frustration and insomnia, I gathered my courage and knocked on her door. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dimly lit interior that was equal parts chaotic and morose. Every wall was adorned with large, vividly painted crosses and hastily scrawled biblical inscriptions. Jesus, angels, and other cryptic phrases seemed to pulse with an otherworldly glow under the flickering light. The air was thick with a musty odor of aged carpet and an indescribable stench of decay that clung to every surface. I politely asked her to lower the volume, but she merely regarded me with an inscrutable stare and a fleeting, sorrowful smile before shutting the door firmly and resuming her rituals. That night, as I lay in bed with my boyfriend peacefully sleeping beside me, a chilling presence invaded my dreams. I awoke to find a dark silhouette looming over our bed. At first, I thought it was a trick of the half-light, but then I heard a raspy whisper, "Lock your doors at night." It was Veronica, standing there with eyes that held a mix of warning and madness, before she silently vanished into the shadows. The following morning, strange murmurs and incomprehensible mutterings floated beneath my window, a ghostly echo of the previous night's terror. Later, another neighbor confided in me that he, too, had been disturbed by her inexplicable midnight wanderings. Eventually, the police intervened during one of her nocturnal excursions, escorting her away to a mental health facility. Yet even after her departure, the unsettling memory of her haunting presence and cryptic warnings continues to disturb my quiet moments. 4. The Midnight Incident. It was a particularly quiet night as I wrapped up my shift at a small manufacturing plant on the outskirts of Detroit. The clock had just passed 12:30 a.m., and the industrial district was shrouded in a heavy silence, punctuated only by the distant hum of machinery and the occasional blare of a lone siren. Suddenly, that silence was shattered by a violent crash that sent a jolt of adrenaline racing through my veins. Rushing outside, I discovered with mounting horror that someone had hurled a sizable rock through the front window of the building. The broken glass glittered in the dim streetlight like a scattering of dangerous diamonds, and the act itself felt both random and menacing. My heart pounded as I immediately contacted security, reporting the incident in a voice that trembled with a mixture of fear and disbelief. With no other explanation in sight, I left the premises and set out on my journey home along a deserted highway. The road, lined only by the occasional flickering street lamp, seemed to stretch endlessly into the dark. Midway through the drive, as I rounded a lonely bend, I noticed something even more disconcerting. The back door of my car, which I distinctly remembered locking, was now ajar. I pulled over at a desolate parking lot and meticulously inspected every corner of the vehicle, my pulse quickening with every passing second. Despite my frantic search, there was no sign of any intruder or evidence of tampering. About 30 minutes later, still unsettled, I decided to try and shake off the creeping sense of dread by meeting a friend for a late-night drink at a nearby diner. Hoping that the familiar comfort of a friendly chat might calm my nerves, I hopped on my bicycle and pedaled under a clear, star-studded sky. The cool night air, instead of soothing me, seemed to amplify my heightened senses. As I rode along a quiet road, a sudden awareness struck me. A presence was following closely. Glancing nervously in my rearview mirror, I saw a stranger riding parallel to me. His face contorted into an unervingly intense smile that sent chills down my spine. The realization that he was riding a bicycle identical to one that belonged to my mother only deepened my unease. With a surge of adrenaline, I pedaled as fast as I could, heart hammering as I raced against both the dark and the inexplicable omen. When I finally reached the safety of my home, I was met with two unsettling confirmations. My mother's bicycle was gone, and one of my car's doors remained inexplicably open. That night left me questioning the fragile boundaries between coincidence and something far more sinister lurking in the dark. 5. The Phantom Payphone. During my tenure as a night security guard at a secluded campground in Bend, Oregon, I found solace in the solitude of my nightly routine, which stretched from midnight until the early hours of dawn. Isolated from the bustling world, I spent countless hours in a modest, dimly lit shack, often losing myself in video games on my portable console as the only distraction from the pervasive quiet of the wilderness. Early in my first week, a seasoned colleague mentioned an oddity, a solitary payphone located just a few feet away from our post. He casually noted that it rang exactly once every night at 3:42 a.m., dismissing it as nothing more than an automated test call. For several nights, I paid little heed to the peculiar phenomenon, attributing it to the quirks of an aging system. However, one sweltering summer night, driven by an insatiable mix of curiosity and apprehension, I purposely left the shack's windows open. As the clock struck 3:42, the payphone rang, a single chilling tone that echoed across the silent campground, sending tremors through the still night. With a deep breath and a racing heart, I picked up the receiver. At first, I was met with nothing but an unsettling silence, punctuated only by sporadic static and the sound of my own nervous breaths. Over the course of a week, I repeatedly answered the call, each time softly greeting it with a tentative hello, only to be met by the same inexplicable void. Then, in the early days of November, the routine shattered. On that fateful night, I answered the payphone with a mixture of dread and hope, my voice barely more than a whisper in the oppressive darkness. Moments later, a deep, gravelly voice, raw and laden with an emotion that seemed to transcend time, breathed in a manner that resembled a struggle, as if the speaker were grappling with a hidden torment. In a moment so surreal it defied explanation, the voice enunciated my full name, complete with my middle initial and surname, a detail so personal that it felt as though someone had reached into the depths of my soul. The call ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake and my hands trembling on the receiver. Subsequent investigations revealed that the call had originated from a number in Nevada, a revelation that deepened the mystery, as I was stationed far away in Oregon. To this day, the enigma of the phantom payphone haunts my nights, a chilling reminder of that eerie convergence of technology, fate, and the inexplicable.